Hi everyone, this is MJ with iFormBuilder. Welcome to the Art of Form Building. Today we're going to be exploring the new iForm elements and input types. Your host will be Berit today, and then I will be fielding any questions that come up along as we're going through this.
All right, thanks MJ. So if you haven't been to one of these sessions before, my name's Berit Johannesson, and I've been working with the iFormBuilder team and Zerion software for a little over 2 years now. And our focus with these webinar sessions is to really make sure that you are using best practices with building iFormBuilder projects. Now, I see that some of you who are in attendance today have been building forms for a while now, and hopefully you'll still gain some knowledge from this session, just because we are going to go through some of the new input types that we have available to our users. So just a little bit about today's session. We're going to start by going through the iFormBuilder support, just kind of giving you a little bit more details to see when you need help, where you can actually go. We're then going into best practices for form building, the form building golden rules. We're going to build out a form. I've partially built a form already, but we're going to finish that out, and then we're going to have Q&A sessions. Actually, the Q&A can happen at any point during today. So if for some reason you can't hear me or you need more clarification on something, feel free to speak up or write a little message to MJ, and we'll go about it that way. All right, so here are the different types of support that we have available. So we have our Customer Success Center, and I'm going to bring up this window over here. This is what our iFormBuilder Customer Success Center looks like. So it's iFormBuilder.Zendesk. If you're not currently signed in, then the way that you do that is you go under the Sign In on the right-hand column. And at the very bottom, it says New to iFormBuilder Help Desk, and you can sign up there. I'm going to just go ahead and sign in with my credentials, and at this point you'll see that I have my little picture up there. Other support that you have once you're in the Customer Success Center is we have this little chat box at the bottom. You can put in your name, your email, and your phone number, and then once you've done that, you can start chatting with one of our iFormBuilder agents. We have some awesome agents available for you to chat with and to talk through your project and your workflow. Joe's on there a lot of the times, as well as Penny. Penny's in our Hong Kong office, so if you're having a late night form building, she'll probably be the one who's going to help support you. The next part of support that we have here is with our release notes. So our release notes come out once or twice every month, and our most current one is 8.2. You'll notice that this release is actually happening this week, which is really exciting, and we have two really neat advancements for the platform, one being the package builder, which allows company admins to export and import form packages. So essentially creating this whole big library, you're able to export all of that to store locally if you need to, as well as if you have another group that wants to build off of the same forms that you've previously created, you can share that with them even if they're in a different profile. So that's one that I'm really excited about. But also we have our API 6.0. So this is a brand new version of our API. When I actually first started here, API 5.0 was the one that had just come out. So this one is much needed, and the other ones will still work, but this one has some great new advancements and more flexibility. So if you are using our API, then I think you'll really like the new version that we have available. Also in our Customer Success Center, we have our iFormBuilder Academy. This is where you can go and you can see a list of the recorded sessions that we've previously had in our upcoming sessions. But we also have some other training feedback forms, our Kickstart training program details on that, as well as the different training courses that we have available to you and your team if you're interested in purchasing and getting those. Going back to the main point or main page of our Customer Success Center, a great asset that I love is our community forums. So this is where you're able to vote for features, is one of the most popular ones. So at the very bottom, I have vote for features, and this is where we get all of the ideas for upcoming releases within iFormBuilder. We listen to our people and our users, and whatever gets the most votes, those things are going to eventually be added into the platform. So if you have some time, I would suggest going in there and seeing if if you wanted to add something, but as well as if you wanted to give some upvotes to some other things that you want to see within the platform. All right, and then I think I've gone over everything except the community or the implementation support. If you're looking for any kind of implementation support, maybe you have a new project and you want us building out forms for you, please let us know and we'd be happy to do that. We're happy to support you in whatever way that we can. Okay, moving forward, we have our best practices within form building. So how to successfully build a form. The first thing that I want to mention to you with this is use a naming convention. Not only is that going to help you recognize within your form builder account what forms are connected, but if you're bringing more team members into your form builder project, this will allow them to identify quickly what's that top level. So what's that parent form? And then what is the child form or forms that are connected? The next thing that you want to make sure you do, and you can see I am really excited about this one with my exclamation point at the end, but you want to make sure that you test in the iForm app. This is a huge best practice, and it's something that some folks forget to do before they go live, and then they realize that some things are broken or not looking the way that they wanted to within the iForm app. But not only should you test your form constantly, you should also make sure that you build for the device type. What I mean by that is we give you the option to have the iForm app and your forms being used on either the Android platform or the iOS Apple platform. With that being said, iFormBuilder originated with the iOS platform, so we do have some features that are available there that are not available in the Android device, but also vice versa. There are some things that the Android platform allows for that the iOS doesn't. So if you're curious at what those may be, this is a link to our knowledge base, and it tells you the differences between the features that you can have with the iOS and the Android device. The next thing that you want to remember is you want to remember to always build for the smallest device type. So you can use an iPad, you can use an iPad mini, or you can use an iPod Touch. That's wonderful. But what you'll notice when you're building your forms is the way that they look on the different devices. So specifically, we have our select option list, which if you're unfamiliar, it's the buttons that you see within the app itself. So with that option list, it might look great on your larger devices like an iPad, but when you look at your smaller device, it might crunch up all the words to those options and it might not be legible to the user. So make sure you test on the smallest device type as well. The last thing to note here is that if something doesn't look right in your form, if you have a subform at the very bottom and it's not showing up, or if you've added some images and it's not showing up, if you go into the settings of the iForm app, you'll notice a button that says Clean Local Database. That will just wipe out everything that you have in iForm, and you can resync the iForm app, and at that point, everything should be fixed if your JavaScript statements are accurate. So our next best practice here is the art of using subforms. So subforms are awesome for the usability and for the flow of the forms that you've created. Essentially, if you're unfamiliar with subforms, what they allow you to do is connect what we call a child form, also a subform. You can connect that to that top level form, so your parent form. So in this image that you see on the right-hand side, question 1 is a subform. And if the user taps on question 1, then it'll launch a brand new page with additional questions. So not only does this allow for easier use for your users, but it allows your users to take one or many records. So for question 1, if I only wanted to make sure that they had one response, I could limit it to 1. But if I want to allow them to have as many responses as they need, then they have that availability. So unlike some other platforms which limit how many records can be submitted by a user, this one doesn't. This allows them to do as many as they need. Another thing with subforms that's a best practice is if you want to allow your users to take as many pictures as they want, instead of adding 10, 20 image widgets to a form, instead add one single subform for those photos that just has one photo album in it or one photo widget in it. And at that point, they can take as many as they need. It's also important to think about the layout of the form. And this is specifically because if you can imagine, when you're downloading a form to your device, if you have 300 questions in a parent form, that may take a little bit longer. Now, if you split that up and have maybe 50 questions on the parent form and then have 10 subforms that also have 50 questions, then that's actually going to download a lot faster than if you had that all in one level. So that's another reason to use subforms. But it's also important to keep in mind how many widgets you add to that top level of your form just for that download speed. The next thing that I have here is just to simplify the form identification for your users. So you'll notice that if you're brand new or if you've been using the platform for a little while now, you'll notice that each one of these forms are its own entity. You can see that you can have your own image with that. But if you press the info button, and I'll show you this momentarily when I bring up my device, if you press the info button, it'll give you your users a little bit more details on the form that they're making, or that the records that they have to complete. So by adding a description in the Edit Form Properties page, that allows you to kind of give a little bit more details to your users to make sure that they're actually opening the correct form that they're supposed to. The other thing that you want to do, or you could do, is add a color scheme to these forms so that they can identify which form is which a lot faster by the color, or if they're a part of multiple projects, you can add a color scheme for each project, and that's done with the reference ID 5. And I'm going to be going through how to do that in just a little bit. Oh, actually, I was wrong. I'm going to show you right here. So this is just gives you a little idea on how that's done. This is in the Edit Form Properties page. This is just an example of what you would do at the bottom to be able to add that color scheme. Now, I placed this in this document not so that you can do it right now, but you can refer back to it later if you want to add a color scheme and change around how the forms look within your account. So then just some additional tips that I have and best practices is when you're building out a form, I always have multiple browser tabs open for ease of use to jump between a parent form and a subform, or when I'm doing any kind of smart controls and I'm passing data from a subform into my parent form or vice versa, I may need to see that table name and copy that data column name. So opening a browser for each form that I'm working on will make that a lot easier and will cut down on your human error. Another additional tip is just really more of a reminder, and that's that every form that you build will automatically be assigned to your device. That being said, what you may want to do later after you've tested everything is you may want to unassign those subforms so that you don't have to look at those on your device every day. You only have to see the parent form. And the same thing goes that if you are assigning these forms to your users, keep in mind that you only need to assign the parent form, and once you assign the parent form, all the subforms attached to that parent form or that top level will come with that. And the last additional tip is to follow the iFormBuilder golden rules. So some considerations to have if you're just starting with an iFormBuilder project is just really what devices will the end users be using? What naming conventions do you use for this form and for the option list? And just to reiterate with the naming convention, not only does that help you identify what the form is, but other people who are working on it. So if you do have multiple people working on your project, I would kind of create a document for stating what the naming convention should be so that everyone's following the same standard within your account. The next project consideration to have is just how do you want to structure the forms? Are you going to break up that form into multiple subforms, and how many layers? Because you could have a parent form with a subform attached to another subform and subform. So it could be very long. It could be very long on how that's created, but you want to make sure that you kind of map that out prior to building the forms that you're doing. The next initial project consideration to have is just the input types. What should you use for each question? We have over 40 different types, and so it's really important that you know about those different ones so that you can make sure that you're collecting the right kind of data for that information. And the last one here is just where can you add form functionality, i.e. where can you add our smart controls, the JavaScript, to cut down on human error and the time that the user is actually inputting data if you already have that. And then our magical form building golden rules. So the first one here I already said, and it's the test before going live. This, again, I can't reiterate it enough. We've had so many people contact us while they're out in the field and saying, hey, we're having all these issues. And partly it's because they didn't test the form on the devices before the data collection started. The next form building golden rule is to make sure that you're using unique data column names that are database friendly. And I'll show you momentarily where the data column name is located, but we also have a reserved list. So what this will bring up is a list of words that cannot be used for your data column names. It's really important to make sure that you remember these, or at least keep in mind as you create your data column names. One thing that you'll notice, and what we allow for you to do, is that the label and the data column names do not need to be the same thing. And so if there is a term there that is not database friendly, then you'll want to uncheck the based on label box and then create a data column name that is database friendly. The label is what the user is going to see. So if the data column name doesn't look exactly what you want the users to see, that's fine. That's just what you'll see in the data. The other thing to note is if you do receive an error like this that says error, data column name, location is not allowed, then what you'll have to do is you'll press the OK button. You'll have to refresh your form builder page and then open that form over again and make any changes that you need to at that point. And the last form building golden rule, and this is the one that stumps a lot of people, and it's really important if you are editing live forms, because you need to make sure that you do not change the input type, the data size, or the encryption of an element on a live form. It will delete the data. So what I'll do is momentarily I'll show you how to disable an element and to show you how to make any changes if it is a live form. All right, so before we jump into building a form, how's everyone doing? MJ, are there any questions coming in?
So far, there haven't been any, Berit.
All right, great. Well, thank you guys all, and hopefully you're still with me and I haven't put you to sleep yet. So the first thing that I want to mention to you, and I'm going to try to have two screens open so that we can see both of these. It's a little too small there. So on the Edit Form Properties page, this is launched once you press the Create New Form. At the very top, you'll notice the form label. I've already put this information in because I wanted to make sure I had this set up before our session today. But the form label is what you'll see on your device, where underneath it, where we have our table name, this is where you want to use that naming convention. So what I've done is I have July Art of Form Building in _parent, identifying that this is the top level of the form. For every subform that I'm going to attach to this, I'm going to start it with July Art of Form Building _, and then I'm going to have the name of the subform and then _C, symbolizing that that is the child form to this parent. Beneath that, we have the description, and this is where I mentioned to you that it's really helpful to have a description for your users on the form so that they can almost double check that they're opening and completing the correct form for that project. Then we have our form icons. Now you can use one of the many that we have available to you, but you don't have to. What I've done for this specific form is I've actually searched for an image for the Art of Form Building, and I've copied that URL and I've placed that underneath the form icon in that URL section. So at this point, when I look at this form on my device, it has that image in that as the icon for that form. Beneath that, we have our reference IDs. So reference IDs allow you to do a lot more customization on what the user sees on their device and how the form actually functions. The one that I have placed in information for prior to this point is in reference ID 5. And this is the one that allows me to add a different color scheme to that form so that the user can identify that that this is a part of a specific project. Reference ID 1, 2, 3, and 4. Some of these allow you to only, like reference ID 1, there's a reference ID that will allow the user to only submit a record between, maybe you have 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. That's the only time they're able to submit that record, or maybe they can only submit one record per that particular form ever. So maybe it's like a permission or something. Reference ID 2 allows you to customize what is viewed in the table when you're looking on your device. And then, I'm going to skip over reference ID 3 and reference ID 4 right now, but we do have a lot of documentation on that if you're interested in looking at it later. And I do have it linked within this document that I have for you. The only other one that I want to mention to you right now is the sort order. So if you're familiar with building forms, then you'll notice that every new form that you build is always going to be at the bottom. If that's not what you want, if you want to actually put it in a unique order, then you can do that with the sort order. You would go through here and put in the order for each form that you have and how you want them to be displayed to the user. Now, the only problem with that is, say you add a new form and you want it to be the third option out of 10. Then you have to go in and reorder all of the sort orders in every form that you have to then match up with that new order that you've created.
Hey, Berit, don't mean to cut you off, but I have a question here.
Sure.
Can you upload your own form icons, so any custom icons? Can you go through that?
Sure. So as far as uploading your own custom one, it actually needs to be a public URL. So if you're using like a Dropbox folder and that's a public folder, then if you can copy that URL, you can place it here, and that would be your custom icon. The other thing I wanted to note here, or MJ, please let me know if there's any follow-up questions to that.
Absolutely.
Underneath our reference ID and our sort order, we have our label icons URL. So if you plan on adding any images to the form, maybe you have a diagram that you want in there, or maybe you have a logo that you want on the very top, then you would start by placing in basically you're going to do the URL web address to that folder structure where that image is hosted. And once you've done that, then you call to that specific image within your form. And then at the very bottom here, we have our page level JavaScript. And this allows you to do a lot more functionality within your form and within creating a more user-friendly experience if you want to have a lot of conditional statements. And the last thing I'll note here is that on the Edit Form Properties page is where you'll delete your form. So as you go through and you're testing and you're building all these forms just to play around with the platform a little bit, if you find that later on you no longer want to have this in your account, the Edit Form Properties page is where you'll delete them. Okay, so now I've saved the form and I am in the form builder. Now, if I need to go back to the Edit Form Properties page, that's done just by pressing the Edit button here at the very top. So just to go through the element properties that we have here is we have the common. This is where you have your label and your data column name. As a reminder, that data column name is what needs to be database friendly. So if I were to use like the term location here, and I know that's not database friendly, so I'd have to uncheck this box and then make the changes to that data column name so that it is database friendly. So again, the label is what your users will see, and the data column name is what you'll see in like your feeds and your metadata. Underneath that, we have our input properties. You'll notice here that I just used the label. Now I'm going to just select this other element to show you a little bit more details within our input properties. So you can have encryption. Encryption can happen, you first have to set up your encryption key, and then at that point you're able to allow for encryption on any of the elements that you have within a form. If this, let's say this is a live form, and right now I have this as a text element, but later on I want to make it so that it's a read-only element and I want to default it to the user's name. The first thing that I would need to do is I need to disable the element that was previously being used, and then I can duplicate it. Well, actually, I guess I didn't have to disable it right away, but once I make that copy, I can then make any changes to that input type and not affect the data that was previously collected. Now, this is just for if you're in a live form. If you're still in the testing and you're making changes, then you don't have to make that disable an element and make the duplication. You can just make those changes at that time. By disabling it, it's almost as now staying as a placeholder for the data that was previously collected, and it's adding a new column for all the additional fields that you're going to collect with the new or with the change that you've had take place. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to save this form. And you'll notice I don't have mine on auto save. That's just a personal preference. I try to save my element or save my form as often as possible. And just to make sure that my data column names are database friendly. So going back to our input properties, like I mentioned before, we have over 40 different types of inputs. So what you can do to learn more is just hover over each one of these, or you can go to our help desk, which we have a little tab here, and the walk me through will also give you some more information on the different form builders. The disabled we just mentioned, the encryption we talked about. You also have the required field. So if you want to make sure that your users fill that field out, make sure that you check that off. If I scroll down even further, and sometimes people, they never know that this existed until I mention it, is you can also default a keyboard. So right now for the location, that's just going to show, even though this is a text element, it's going to just show up as the ABC keyboard. If I wanted to change this and have it maybe as number or punctuation or a number pad or phone pad, I can set that up by selecting what type of keyboard I want. Now, like I mentioned earlier, we're going to walk through this form, and I did have it partially complete or partially started. So you'll notice that I have this field called location of event. So I want to select the location widget for this information, and that's all I have to do. And momentarily, you'll see what it looks like when the location is gathered. Okay, and this information here, we have our Smart Control, Smart Table Search, Reference ID in the Info section. As you can see here in my PDF, I have links to all of these, so if you want more information on that later, this would be a great tool for you. Now, you may have noticed that currently I've called it a widget, I called it input type, an input, and an element. Just keep in mind that those are all the same thing, and depending on what iFormBuilder agent you talk to will probably depend on what they say. And even during maybe your 5-minute phone call that you have with them, they may call it a widget, input type, input, or element. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at our knowledge base and when you're talking with us. So here's a list of the different elements and input types that you have for your form building. And each one of these has a description, and you can click on that element input type and you'll be brought to a description of each element that we have. But if you're looking at this right now and you want to have more details on what some of these are, please ask MJ and we'd be happy to help with that. So the next thing that I want us to go into is going into our option list and our option list manager. So in this slide, you can see that there are 3 types of option lists that iFormBuilder gives you. You have the select, which is the buttons that you'll see on the actual form. You then have a pick list, which is a box that opens up and will show the different options you have available. And then the multi-select, which looks exactly like the pick list, except it allows the user to have more than one option selected. I've already created this pick list and I've assigned an option list element to it, but what I want to do is I want to show you how to actually add an option list if you haven't done that yet. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new input, and I'm going to go up to my common section, and I'm going to call this option list 101. And so this is just for showing you an example. I probably wouldn't keep this in my form, but if I go into the input type, I'm going to select, let's see, if I'm only going to allow for like 3 or 4 options, then that's when I want to use a select option list. If I'm going to have more and longer options, then that's when I want to use like a pick list. So for this one, I'm just going to use select, and I'll go down into my option list manager, and I click on the option list manager. Now I can see all of the option lists that have been previously created for my forms, but I may want to create a new one, and that's done by pressing the plus button, and at that point the pound sign my option list will appear. So I'm going to call this option list 101. And because, like I mentioned, this is going to be a select option list, so I only want to have a limited amount, or I know I almost only have a limited amount of real estate for these options, so I'm just going to say the numbers 1 through 5. And a best practice that we have is if you do want to give the users the option for the other field, so if they select other, then they can add that text later on. The best practice that I see, because of our new functionality where you can search in an option list, is to actually add the other at the very top of the list so that the user doesn't have to scroll to the bottom to find that that's actually available to them. Now that's up to you, but I prefer having the other on the very top, but also I prefer to have the other on the very top because one of the things with, if this option list were to be live and I'd want to make any edits, the best way to make edits to an option list is always adding them to the bottom. So do I really want the other option in the middle of my pick list? Not necessarily. The reason you always have to add it to the bottom is because your option lists are using this index value listed on the left-hand side. So it starts with 0 and continues up to however many options that you have. And the key value also needs to be unique. When you start building more functionality within your forms, you can use the conditional value to show or hide responses and to use segmented option lists. But that we go into a little bit more in our smart form building. So now that I've created this list, I want to save my list. Oops. Bear with me here. So I'm going to save my list and then assign that list to my element. And at this point, that select option list is now available. So I want to save my form, and I'm going to bring up my device and show you what we have so far. While I'm doing that, is there any questions?
At the current time, Berit, there is not.
All right, thank you. Okay, so you should all see my device at this point. So I'm going to go into the iForm app, and I need to make sure that I have the most up-to-date form. So I'm going to sync my device, and I can tell at the very top that it's downloading everything that's been updated, and then I get a report telling me what has been done. So I press OK. The very bottom, the bottom right, you'll see the July Art of Form Building. And you can see that, I mean, it's kind of hard to see on this screen, but I have a little green box around it to go with my color scheme as well. If I press the Info button, this is where I see the description that I mentioned to you before. So this form is for demonstrating form building in our July webinar. I can press the Open button, And now what I have is that read-only field that's defaulting to the first name, and then I have the location element, so I can refresh that information, press done, and that's telling me the lat long, altitude, speed, horizontal, and vertical accuracy, as well as the timestamp for where I am at this exact moment. Now, if I wanted to, I could also parse out this information. And so maybe I just want to see the lat long, and then I want to have that create a dynamic URL. That can all be done with our JavaScript. From there, we have a pick list. So this is what training session are you attending? And again, you can see that I have other at the very top, but then I have the other, the options below that. Like I said, this is a pick list, so a box appears on top, and the select underneath is where you have those little buttons. So far so good. We're testing our form. Everything looks right. You'll notice beneath that I have a counter widget. So this is to count participants as they enter. So just by pressing that plus button, it's going to go up as many times as I see people enter. I can also go down. This is going in the increment of 1. But if I wanted to edit that and change, maybe I wanted to go per 0.5 or go by 2s, whatever it may be for the counter widget, I can edit that. Again, this is one of our newest releases, and it's a lot of fun. So try to see where you can use that in your forms as well. Underneath that, we have a subform attached. Now, what I've done to attach that subform is I've gone into our edit form properties page in the input type, or no, I'm sorry, not edit form properties page, but under our element properties in the input properties, I select the input type subform. Once I've done that, I go down into the smart paging, and in the smart paging, I'll see all of the forms that I had previously created. Now, if you haven't created your subform yet, or if you're creating it at the same time as your parent form, you may not see it listed here. And if that's the case, you'll have to load the parent form again, refresh the window and open it. And at that point, you should see the subform that you created. Again, the subform it can be any form and in your account. So it's nothing different from what we've created here.
Berit,
Sure.
I just had a good question coming about functionality with the smart controls. Could you possibly, with either your pick list or your select list, show if you select other how a text box could appear using conditional values?
Sure, I can easily show that. What I'll do here is, if we'll say with this option list, so our option list 101, I'm going to create a new input underneath. And I'm going to call this other option. And I need to go to the option list 101, and I need to copy that data column name. So this is just all in lowercase and underscore option underscore list underscore 101. I want to copy that and go down to that text field that I just created and go into my smart controls. In the dynamic value, I'm going to place that data column name of the option list and go equals equals 0. The reason I'm choosing 0 is because that was the first option that the user is going to see. And like I mentioned before, on the index values, it always starts with 0. So I'm going to save this, and I'll go back to my form here. And I'll refresh my window. Or I can go into the settings and press the sync, and at this point, it's going to get that information that we've just added. But going back to what we were talking about with the subforms, so I've chosen the input property subform. I've then gone down to smart paging, and I've selected the form that I want to be as the child and as the subform. For this one, it's actually an image one. Once you do that, you'll go under the link mode. You'll see that you have the single or multiple. So the single only allows the user to do one record, while multiple allows them to do as many as they need. And then you have the option to give them a separate table view. I usually prefer not to have that, but it is an option available for you. The reason you may want to do that is if they're collecting maybe over 10 subform records, and they want to be able to view that in a table quickly while they're completing it. That would be one reason why the table view would be good, and some people just prefer it. The other thing that I want to show you is for this specific subform, I've used our new subform batching mode, and that allows for the subform record to continue to be opened until the user presses cancel. What I had to do to make that happen is for that specific element in the reference ID 1, in the reference ID section for the element properties, I've placed in subform underscore batch underscore mode all in capitals. And let me open my form so that you can see what that looks like. Oops. Oops, sorry, I see what I did. So for that, I was going a little too fast. For the smart controls that we had, for the option list, when to show and hide it, that should be placed in the conditional value and not the dynamic value. So the conditional value is always what you'll use if you want to focus on what visually is being displayed to the user. So I'm going to save that. And I'll refresh my form in just a moment to show you what that looks like, but I want to show you that subform batch mode and how that works. So again, we have our photos with subform batching applied. Looks like a basic subform. I asked the user, would you like to take a single photo or would you like to annotate or draw on photos? If I choose annotate, then it'll bring up our annotation feature, which is our drawing widget. Again, this will allow you to take pictures. So here's outside the office right now. I'm going to use that photo, and I can use that as a background image. And then I'll take another photo, and let's say I want to have that electrical outlet. Maybe that's what's broken, so I'm going to zoom in there. I'll use that photo as a floating image. And this allows you to kind of have a big picture, but then also be able to zoom in on the important things, as well as draw on the actual picture itself and add icons if you wanted to. So there's lots of things that you can do with the annotation. Excuse me. Then you can do the notes or the people involved. And then once I press done, again, because this is a subform batch mode, it just reopens another subform record, so then I can continue doing what I need to without having to go back to that parent form over and over again. If I hadn't set that up, it would always go back and I'd have to press the plus button over and over again. So then say I've taken all the pictures that I need. If I press cancel, then it brings me back to that parent form and I can see the table listed below with the details for what I'd captured. So I'm just going to sync that form again so that we can double check to make sure that hiding the other option is taking place and only displaying it if they choose other. So option list 101, we chose other, and now it gives us that text field, says other option. But if I choose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then it disappears. So there's two more things that I want us to add to our form today. Underneath our counter widget and our subform, we have an email record. Now, right now this is just a text field. I want to make this into actually a little bit more usable and in using our email widget. So what I'll do is I'll go under my input properties, I'll select email. Once I select email, I check the box that says send email. At this point, they could place in their email address, but what I like to do to make it a little bit easier is I like to give them their email domains so that they only have to do as limited amount of typing as possible. So how this is done is that after I've selected it as the input type for email, I go under the option list manager, and I've already set this up. So I have my email domain list here. I have actually a couple of them, so I can choose which one I want. I'll choose this one, and I'll assign that list to my element. And in a moment, I'll show you what that looks like on our device. The next thing that I wanted us to finish today is to assign the record to the supervisor. So this is really easy. This allows, maybe I only have to complete I have to complete this form, but then I need my supervisor to sign off on it. So the way that's done is by using our assign to widget. And at that point, they'll see all of the users within this form builder account, and they're able to assign this specific record to that individual. And one other fun tool that I like that I didn't add here is the attachment widget. So I'll add a new input. If I go to the attachment, I would place in an attachment link here, and this can be an MOV file, a JPEG, a PDF, and whatever I've attached will actually be downloaded and stored locally on the device for the user to have available to them even when they're offline. So I don't have anything there right now, but we'll just save our form anyways, and we'll go make sure everything looks right on our device. So while it syncs, there's just, I did forget to mention to you that I added the signature widget. There wasn't anything difficult with that one, just going under the input type and selecting signature. Also at the very top for the first named, I used one of the built-in functions for iFormBuilder, so it's just iFormBuilder.firstName. So that's why it's defaulting to my first name when I open up the device, and I can't edit that. And we have a couple other iFormBuilder built-in functions, and on the PDF that I share, that is available to you to look at. So on the screen, I'm just going to press the plus button, and we're going to create our new record, and it will really test to make sure everything looks right. So first name's pre-populated. I go to location of event. I have all that information is accurate. I can select other here and just type in, we'll say course 202. And then we can count all the participants that we have. We can go into our subform. We'll just take a photo here. And we'll go back. We'll only do one record just for our testing here. Then we go into our email record. And this is where if I just place Berit, I can scroll Zerion software. See how much faster that would have been to actually have to type Berit at Zerion software. So that's why we would use the option list for an email widget. And then we have our assign record to supervisor. You'll notice I'm the only one here because I'm the only one in this account, but I'll assign it to myself so you can see that. The my element 3 was our attachment widget that we didn't actually attach to. And then the very bottom, we have our signature. I'm going to submit, press done. I'm going to sync this to the cloud. And it's at this point, since I used the attachment widget, I will receive a notification telling me a new record's been assigned to me, but I'll also receive an email of that report since I set up the email widget as well. So here's that little notification, so new records have been assigned. All right, so just let me minimize this device. Let's make sure we've covered everything so far today. So in the option list, we have the creating and editing a live option list. So that add the other option to the top. Always add new options to the very bottom. If you want to remove an option, you'll have to, instead of actually removing it from the list, you'll have to place false in the conditional value. If you were to remove it, then the index values for all the elements would change, and that's when you'll lose some of your data again. So keep that in mind when editing a live option list as well.
Berit, quick question.
Sure.
Talking about pre-populating things, how would you get, let's say, a first name or a last name to appear, or maybe an employee ID, something of that nature?
So the first name and last name are actually built-in functions within iFormBuilder. So what I showed before for the first name is just iFormBuilder.firstName. If I wanted to have the last name as well, I could actually duplicate the first name field, and I'll change this to say your last name. And in the smart controls, instead where it says first, I would just change to last. Now, if you wanted to pre-populate fields like a user's ID, like an ID badge or something, if you do have an ID badge, you could use our barcode scanning. Additionally, what we have available to you is our Smart Table Search. So this is this section below. What this does is it ties to this table name and column name will tie to another form that you've created that essentially is going to be like a database. Once you've connected that database form to this form using the Smart Table Search, any additional fields that you want pre-populated based off of a unique identifier, maybe their first and last name, could be pre-populated because of that database. Now, I go into a lot more details with that in our next session, but I also have some links to it in the PDF that I share. But just to reiterate, you can use our built-in functions to pre-populate fields in your form. You can default elements just with JavaScript, but you can use our barcode scanning, which is the Manatee widget, or the Smart Table Search to allow for pre-populated fields as well. Any other questions, MJ?
Yes, actually, hold on one sec.
Sure.
Can QR codes also be scanned?
Yes, they can. QR codes, Manatee Works is an awesome widget to use, and if you haven't used it yet, what you'll have to do is you'll have to download the Manatee Works app, which is free from the App Store. But then you'll add in the input properties, you'll select the Manatee Works widget, and then you have a list of symbologies that are available, and you'll notice that QR code is one of those. You have scanner effort, and if you want that as a required field as well. And I have some documentation on using that and setting that up that I'd be happy to share with anyone who's interested. I don't know if we have that on our help desk yet, so if you want to just tell MJ in the chat that you want that PDF, I'd be happy to send it your way. Going back to just the option list, one thing I didn't mention is if you did want to add icons to your option list, you can do that when you're in the option list manager. Underneath the advanced section, there's the bottom part says icons URL, and you can place icons in there to make it a little bit more user friendly, like I have here for yes, no, non-applicable. So visual cues for your users are helpful by using the icon URL. All right, so here's some just additional things that you can start thinking about doing. And again, these are all links. So you can pass data from the parent form element to a subform element, the Smart Table Search, which is what I was mentioning about defaulting elements based off of a form that's used as a database, essentially. You can integrate with our hardware. So we have temperature probes, we have a Zebra printer, we have Linea Pro, and we have different hardwares that you can integrate with. And if there isn't something, we have the node as well for temperature. But if there isn't something that or a piece of hardware that we're currently not integrated with and you want us to be integrated with, please let us know, and we can work on that, or try to talk to whoever created that hardware to see what could happen. Other things to add to your form is using the ESRI widget. So if you're currently using ESRI and you want to have some attributes coming into your form builder, then you can connect your accounts, your ArcGIS Online account to your iFormBuilder account to allow for data to flow bidirectionally, as well as connecting to the collector app itself. So a user could start with the collector and open up and launch iForms to finish creating all the details. Going forward with adding more, you can use our post URL. So by assigning a post URL, you are saying every time a record is submitted, post it to this specific web service. So maybe you're using like a reporting tool, or you're using Google, you want Google spreadsheets to be pre-populated with iFormBuilder data. or whatever, a dashboard tool, whatever it may be, you can use our post URL to automate that workflow and cut down on you having to do it or someone else having to do it. And the keyboard type we mentioned today, as well as the form menu updates. Just to come to an end here, if you want to reach out to me, if you have any questions, feel free. Here's my email address listed under the contact. We also have on this link, you'll be able to go to our upcoming sessions as well as viewing our past sessions. One thing to note, the next session that we have, it's early August, and it's going to be with Ben Ray, and he's going to be talking about the ESRI and iFormBuilder integration. So if that's something that you're interested in learning more about or implementing with your project, make sure you sign up for that one. And then here's links to other support options as well as our ebooks. All right, well, that's really all. Thank you guys again for attending. And MJ, thanks for your help with fielding the questions.
No problem at all.
Have a good day, everybody.
Have a good day, everyone.